All right, this is a look at the Magi and the Mighty, an official but yet unpublished expansion that was playtested by the original creators of Titan and their friends. A user on BoardGameGeek.com recreated this expansion through the playtest materials that someone had sent him, colored it, organized it, and typed up the rules and everything. So thank you, Daniel Karp, for that. You can find that in the Files section of the game Titan on BoardGameGeek.com. That's where I got it, and that's where I recreated this expansion, because I consider it official enough to add it to my games. Anyway, I'm going to go over a quick rules summary of the new stuff that this can put in the game, some of the rules changes, charts, etc. I'm not going to go over in detail what each spell does. You will have to look at that in the rules, because that's 18 pages of rules, and I'm not just going to sit here and record a token while I explain what a spell does. So let's just dive in, take a look, and hopefully you can find a way to create this expansion for yourself like I did and add it to your game. The Magi and the Mighty is a supplement to Titan. It can't be played by itself. It adds magicians and spells and new powerful characters, including a new lord that can partially replace the Titan itself. The Law of Titan remains in effect except where specifically altered or superseded by the new rules. When reference is made herein to the rules of the basic game, Law of Titan precedes that rule. This supplement represents an advanced system of play, so for players not thoroughly competent with the basic game, it's advised that they introduce themselves to this supplement by using only a portion of it at first. So, the Mighty can be played without the Magi. Players may want to just familiarize themselves with the non-mage characters that the supplement adds to Titan before tackling the complexity of spells. You can retain warlocks, demons, and Rakasha, although such may not cast spells. Don't use other Magi or any other spells. Warlocks may not be mustered just for winning a battle in the tower. And you can also use the Magi without the Mighty. Players may find it simpler to acquaint themselves with Magi and spells in conjunction with the master chart of the basic game. Use only the Magi and spell counters and spell cards of this supplement. All sections of these rules apply except rules which pertain only to those characters that are not in use. And this will be what they are referring to when they say spell cards. So some of the components of the game are going to be 63 1-inch square character counters that depict 17 new types of characters. The features of these characters are arranged in the same manner as those in the basic game, but note that the counters of the Magi are numbered in the upper right corner for identification purposes. It will be necessary to number your original warlocks in the same manner 1 through 6. The supplement also comes with 2 sheets of 104 3/4-inch square spell counters that depict various spells that can be cast. At the start of the game, intrinsic spells are sorted and set with the caretaker's stacks. All the other spell counters are placed in a container, which must be provided, for which they can be blindly drawn during the game. This container is hereafter referred to as the cup. The spells index will provide you a full list of the spell counters of the supplement, and that is in the printable rules that were made for this. There is also 6 spell cards that provide the player space to stack their Magi's respective spell counters. Each player receives 1 spell card at the start. Each spell card has a distinct space on it for every mage in the game. Each such space lists the particular mage's intrinsic spells and indicates the maximum number of spells that mage may possess, intrinsic spells included. When a mage acquires spells, its player must place them on the mage's space on its spell card so that it's clear to which mage such spells belong. Spell counters are stacked face down and need not be revealed until they are cast. The rules following will deal with the ways in which characters and spells and supplements are acquired and used within the context of the basic game of Titan. Included in the rules is an advanced character chart, the advanced master chart, and the expanded strike chart. These charts will incorporate all the elements of the Magi and the Mighty supplement to those of the basic game, and they will supersede the respective charts of the basic game. So, let's start with charts. One of the new charts is going to be the advanced character chart. This will list all the characters, their power factors, skill factors, range strength, if they can fly, if they can cast spells, their point value, and the total number available to the caretaker to hand out. You also have a new master chart. No terrain affinities of the original game have been lost due to this. However, some creatures are now on other terrain types to facilitate keeping balance in the game. This chart will supersede all the master charts that are on the master board and will tell you how to get the new creatures in the Mighty expansion and the Magi expansion. So, for example, in the jungle, 2 behemoths can get you a serpent now, but 3 serpents can get you an Etten. In this master chart, the mage native to that terrain is listed at the top. The number to the right of the mage is the number of spells such a mage may draw when its legion ends its move on such a terrain type. Magi are mustered in the manners described later in this video, unlike other creatures that are mustered from the master board. A mage may not muster another of its kind. The other characters of each terrain are listed below the mage, and these are mustered in the same manner described in the Law of Titan itself. When an arrow points from a type of creature, the encircled number of that type may muster a creature of the type to which the arrow points. The number listed beside the creature from which such an arrow points is the number of that type necessary to muster the type immediately below it. For example, we'll go to the brush. In the brush, 2 Gorgons would qualify a legion to muster a demon, or with 3 Gorgons, a legion might muster a behemoth. And then here we have the expanded strike chart. It's required to encompass all the effects that spells might have on skill factors. Note that it does not alter the strike number of any strike that can be determined by using the strike chart of the basic game. The strike differential is determined by subtracting the target factor from the strike factor after each has been adjusted for the pertinent effects of hazards, spells, or range. There is also a hazard spellcasting chart, which specifies restrictions on the placement of magical hazards, which we'll go over a little bit later. There is also a hazard affinity chart, which lists which creatures and conjured creatures are native to the conjured hazard. And then you also have the spell index, which tells you each spell in the game and how many are available and where you can learn what that spell does. And here is exactly why this video is not going to be overly long going into detail of each spell. But I will give you some ideas of what may occur in the game. The Magi and the Mighty supplement adds 17 new types of characters. The characters of Titan and this supplement are divided into several general classes. The advanced character chart lists which characters belong to each of these classes. This section outlines general rules concerning the new characters and will summarize the particular characteristics of their classes. First up are the Lords. A legion that contains a Lord cannot flee from an engagement or be captured. The Lords are now Angel, Archangel, Demigod, and Titan. Only a legion with a Lord may use tower teleportation. A Lord is immune to a normal, non-mage rain strike, attack spells, bless spells, charm spells, and curse spells. A Lord is returned to the caretaker's stack when it is eliminated. Demigods are Lords. A demigod is acquired at the same number as an Archangel for multiples of 1,000 points. A player may opt to take an Archangel or Angel instead. Demigods cannot be summoned into battle. If a player loses his Titan, those of his legions that contain a demigod may remain in play, but his other legions are removed and scored as usual. Such a player would retain the use of his legion markers and continue to move, build, and engage his forces as usual, except that he could no longer Titan teleport or acquire other demigods. When such a player's last demigod is eliminated, the effects are the same as when a player without a demigod loses his Titan. A demigod's power factor is not affected by a player's score. Demilords, which are the Changeling, Demon, Guardian, and Rakasha. A legion that contains a Demilord may flee or be captured. A Demilord cannot be charmed by a charm spell. A Demilord is returned to the caretaker's stacks when eliminated. Changelings are Demilords. They are mustered from towers by legions with 2 or more Guardians or another Changeling. A Changeling has a power factor of 10, in parentheses. 10 is the number of hits needed to slay a Changeling, but the number of dice that it rolls may vary. Changelings also have a special ability in regards to mustering other creatures from the master board. The basic minimum number of the dice that a Changeling rolls when striking is 5. This minimum may be adjusted downward by the effects of spells or hazards. This minimum may be adjusted upward if the Changeling is adjacent to another character or evoked character, friend or foe, whose power factor is unadjusted and is greater than 5. A Changeling may roll as many dice as the strongest power factor unadjusted that is adjacent to and not separated from by a cliff. The Changeling's adapted strength would then be adjusted for any spells or hazards that may affect the Changeling. For example, a changeling adjacent to a hydra, that is atop a dune, would adopt a strength of 10. If it is struck at the hydra, it would lose a die for the dune. This ability to adapt does not affect the changeling's strike factor, nor does it allow the changeling to take the abilities of flying or range striking or spell casting. To adapt a character's power factor, the changeling must be adjacent to such a character at the time the changeling strikes. When a legion that contains a changeling musters, the changeling may be counted as any other type of character for that legion for the containing purposes of mustering. For example, a legion with a changeling and a griffin in the desert could muster a hydra. A changeling may be used to replace any one character. Changelings and one centaur in the woods would not suffice to muster a warbear, nor would one or more changelings by themselves suffice to muster anywhere but tower lands. Demons and Rakasha are demi-lords. They're mustered from their respective terrains in the same manner as creatures. Demons and Rakasha may range strike lords, but their range strikes are not immune to the effects of intervening characters or hazards, as are the range strikes of Magi. If using the Magi supplement along with the Mighty, demons and Rakashas have a limited ability to acquire spells. Spells cast by demons or Rakasha are cast in the same manner as with the same effects as spells cast by a Magi. A demon or Rakasha receives one battle spell from the cup at the end of the maneuver phase on which it enters the battle land. If it's a strategic spell, it is returned and another draw is made. If a player has several demons or Rakasha present, he may not draw that many spells and then assign them as he sees fit, but he must indicate for which character the spell is drawn at the time it is taken. The spell counter is placed face down atop the demon or Rakasha's counter until it is cast. Spell counters do not remain with the demons or Rakasha from battle to battle. Spells drawn for demons or Rakasha are always returned to the cup at the end of battle. The victory point value of a demon or a Rakasha increases by 4 points if a spell counter is drawn for it, even if the spell is not cast. A player may choose not to draw spell counters for some or all of the demons or Rakasha. A demon or Rakasha may not trade spells, nor may a mage give spells to a demon or Rakasha. Then you have Magi. The Magi are demi-lords. They are a special subclass of demi-lords. There are 7 types of Magi. The 6 types of the supplement, druids, enchanters, shamans, sorcerers, witches, and wizards, and the warlocks of the basic game. All 7 types of Magi have the ability to amass and cast spells. Each mage is represented on every spell card and is numbered for purposes of identification. Note that it will be necessary to number the warlocks of the basic game 1 through 6. And again, these are your spell cards. All Magi have the ability to range strike, and all Magi's range strikes ignore the effects of intervening hazards and characters. The skill factor and reduction due to range striking from a distance of 4 hexes, and the immunity of lords to range striking, in the same manner as warlocks in the basic game. Magi whose skill factor is 3 may not range strike 4 hexes. In battle, Magi of the same type may make a unified range strike when range striking at a common target that each mage could itself range strike at, making a single roll which would add 1 die per additional mage. For example, we'll say 3 warlocks are making a unified range strike would roll 8 dice, 2 for the range strength of each warlock and 1 for each of the 2 additional warlocks. A unified range strike would count as a strike of each mage involved. A mage has an inherent ability, which is not represented on the spell counter, to dispel battle spells that it has cast itself. How a Magi is mustered will be gone over later. And the remaining figures are just creatures. Their characters introduced by the supplement are going to be Ettins, Gogs, Jotuns, Juggernauts, Mammoths, Phoenix, and Rocks. These new creatures allow the top-out creatures of the basic game to muster something better than themselves, thereby expanding the enlistment progression by a full step. Note that for mustering purposes, Colossi are not considered lesser creatures in regard to Mammoths or Rocks. The Mammoths or Rocks are not considered lesser creatures in regard to the Jotun or Juggernauts. Colossi cannot be used to muster Mammoths or Rocks, nor can Mammoths or Rocks be used to muster Jotuns or Juggernauts. And also, Colossi cannot be mustered by Mammoths or Rocks. So how exactly do you muster the Magi? Well, a legion must be eligible to muster a mage, or it must win an engagement which the enemy did not flee or concede prior to battle. Any mustering of a mage counts as the once per game turn limit that a legion may muster. A mage may be mustered as a reinforcement by properly qualified legions. Unlike the other demilords or the creatures that are mustered from the master board, Magi cannot muster another Magi. For example, a legion with a witch in the swamp cannot use that witch to muster another. This rule also applies to warlocks, although warlocks may still be mustered by titans as in the basic game. Magi may be mustered from their respective native terrains by 4 of the least type of creature of that terrain, or by 3 of any other single type of creature or demilord of that terrain. For example, in the plains, a legion would need 4 centaurs, 3 lions, 3 rangers, or 3 griffins to muster an enchanter. In the Towerlands, centaurs, gargoyles, and ogres are all considered least creatures. A legion that wins an engagement with an enemy that they did not flee or concede prior to battle is qualified to muster a mage of the terrain of the engagement at the conclusion of the engagement, regardless of the components of the characters of the legion, so long as it does not already contain 7 characters and a mage of that type is available in the caretaker's stacks. The presence of a mage qualifies the legion to muster the least type of creature from its native terrain. For example, a legion with a wizard in the tundra would qualify to muster a troll. Whenever a mage is mustered, including when the mustered as a reinforcement, the player immediately receives its initial spells to the stack on his spell card. Now I'm going to talk about spells. I am going to skip over the direct detail of every spell that the Magi expansion adds to the game. I will instead just go over some basic concepts of the spells. What the spells do are all available in the rules that come with the Magi and Mighty expansion file. So there are 2 types of general categories of spells: strategic spells and battle spells. Strategic spells, like this one here, are denoted by an S at the top of the spell counter. All other spells are battle spells. Some battle spells are intrinsic to Magi. The spell cards note which spells come with that Magi, and they're intrinsic to that type of mage. For example, the enchanter has Dust Devil and Bolt. The spell cards note that, and you can find them by getting intrinsic spell counters, which are denoted by the topmost word being printed in reversed type. That's going to be white lettering within a black bar, like this eagle here. The intrinsic battle spells are sorted and set with the caretaker stacks at the start of the game. The other battle spell counters and all of the strategic spell counters are placed in the cup. Spells are acquired, transferred, and cast in the manners described in the rules. When a mage is returned to the caretaker stacks, so are its intrinsic spell counters, and its other spell counters are returned to the cup. Magi are the only characters that can amass spells. The single spells that demons and Rakasha are allowed to have are discussed earlier. The spell counters that belong to a mage must be stacked on its space on its player's spell card in the manner which the Magi may exchange or give away spells is discussed later. The initial spells that a mage receives included in its intrinsic spells, which are denoted on the spell card. And a draw of these many spell counters in the terrain from which it was mustered allows, which is noted on the advanced muster chart by the number to the right of the mage's power and skill factors. So, for example, we'll take a look at this enchanter. It would be able to draw 1 additional spell. Now, when you create the cup, the spells will be put in there and drawn blindly. So it's advised to use something that can't be see-through, so not a clear Ziploc bag or anything, just maybe a darker bag, pouch, bowl, or cup, so everybody can get spells at random. If, in a weird instance, the cup has no spells in it, then none can be drawn, and draws lost due to this are not made up later. If a player fails to take a mage's initial spells at the time he acquires the mage, he may do so immediately when he realizes his error, receiving both its intrinsic spells and a draw of the appropriate number. No other missed opportunity to draw spells may be made up later. Drawing spells from the cup is always a matter of choice in that the player may choose not to do so. A player may not choose not to take an intrinsic spell. Any mage may draw spells when its legion ends its move on a terrain to which it is native. and every mage native to such terrain may do so. These spells are drawn at the end of a legion's move during the movement phase, unless an enemy legion is present. If an enemy legion is present, such spell draws must await the conclusion of the engagement. In a tower land, to which warlocks are native, warlocks are able to draw 2 spells, and any other type of mage may draw 1. In the plains, brush, marsh, or tower lands, the drawing of spells due to terrain nativity is going to be during the movement phase or at the conclusion of an engagement which precludes the mustering of a character during the enlistment phase. Sorry about that weird pause there. That word is bungling me. Nativity? Nativity. Oh well. Spells may not be drawn as a reinforcement during battle, except for the initial spells of a mage that is mustered as a reinforcement. Nor may a defending legion that wins an engagement draw spells for that terrain other than the initial spells of a mage mustered due to engagement, although it would receive spells for victory. When a legion wins an engagement that was not resolved by flight or concession prior to battle, and it contains 1 or more magi that survived the engagement, which would not include a mage mustered after the engagement, its player may immediately draw the allotted number of spells and distribute them as he sees fit to those surviving magi. The allotted number of spells is determined by the number of points scored for the engagement. Under 25, no spells. 25 to 99, 1 spell. 100 to 199, 2 spells. 200 to 299, 3 spells. 300 or more points, 4 spells. Spells drawn due to winning an engagement are not affected by the terrain of that land or by whether or not the legion reinforced during battle, and the drawing of spells in this manner does not affect a legion's ability to muster or draw spells due to that terrain. Now, the maximum number of spells that a mage may possess, including its intrinsic spells, cannot exceed the number printed on the lower right corner of the mage's space on the spell card. A mage may not draw spells in excess of its maximum, nor may it simply discard spells to make room for others. If a mage is found to have too many spell counters in its stack, the player to the left must blindly choose from the mage's non-intrinsic spells to remove the excess. If a mage is found to have an intrinsic spell to which it is not entitled, such spell is immediately returned to the caretaker's stacks with no compensation for its loss. Although, if a player draws an intrinsic spell counter from the cup, he may immediately return it to the caretaker's stacks and draw again. The methods by which magi may give or trade spells are strictly limited, as described. First, when a mage is mustered, any mage already in that legion may give the new mage one of its spells. This must be done immediately, and it cannot be done if the mage is mustered as a reinforcement during battle. This is only the manner in which a mage may give another mage a spell without compensation. Intrinsic spells cannot be given away. So this warlock decides to give this enchanter a spell, and it is going to be a djinn. Certain magi may trade spells on a one-for-one basis. Intrinsic spells cannot be traded. Players may not trade spells with other players. To trade spells, magi must be in the same legion or in the same coven. If a player has, anywhere among his legions, 3 or more of the same type of mage, they form a coven. When spells are traded, it must always be a one-for-one basis. So that trading spells does not slow play, the spell trading period extends from the end of the player's game turn until the start of his next game turn. When the preceding player announces the end of the game turn, players must cease trading. Although, if he has already transferred a spell from one mage to another, he must complete that particular transaction. A player cannot trade spells during the other player's game turns with magi that are involved in engagements. During a particular spell trading period, a player may trade spells only among the magi of one particular legion or one particular coven. Magi in the same legion need not be the same type to trade, and magi of the same coven need not be in the same legion to trade. When trades are made among the magi of the same legion, the magi must be revealed to show that they are members of the same legion. Spells cannot be traded among members of a coven while any member of the coven is in a legion that is engaged. Note that a player with these 3 unengaged sorcerers could form an active trading coven if he also has another sorcerer that is engaged. There are a total of 38 different strategic spells of 19 types. That's going to be 2 per type. There include 3 types of storm spells, a subcategory of strategic spells that are discussed later. So, a mage may not cast more than 1 strategic spell per game turn, and the casting mage must be shown when casting a spell that is strategic. The effect of a strategic spell is automatic and immediate, and except for storm spells, the effect of the strategic spell cannot be dispelled. Strategic spells are returned to the cup after they are played, except that storm spells are not returned to the cup until they have been dispelled. A legion cannot move or be moved by more than once per game turn, whether by use of a spell, the movement roll, or teleportation. Moving a legion with a spell would count as that legion's 1 move per game turn minimum, and teleporting a legion with a teleport to a tower or a terrain teleportation spell would count as the once per game turn maximum that a player may teleport. The only strategic spells that can be cast during battle are the Muster with a Mage and Resurrect spells, which may be used to reinforce in battle. And here's what those look like. Now, if you're looking for the effect of each individual spell, that'll be section 9.0 of the Magi and the Mighty, starting at 9.4.1, and there will be a list of what each spell does, what you can do with them, and when. Now we will talk about storm spells, a subcategory of strategic spells differing from the other strategic spells in that they are enduring, remaining in effect until they are dispelled. Storms affect the movement of legions, teleporting, and certain other strategic spells uses. A storm also has specific effects on the abilities of the characters in any battle taking place in the land in which the storm was cast upon. A storm spell is cast upon a particular land on the master board. The storm may be cast only on the land that the casting mage's legion occupies at the time of its casting. The storm spell counter is placed on the affected land, and it remains in place, in effect, until it is dispelled. Storm spells can only be dispelled by the use of a Dispel Spell. The elimination of the mage that cast it has no effect on the storm spell. When a storm spell is dispelled during battle, all effects of the storm are ended immediately upon the casting of the Dispel Spell. A mage may cast a storm spell during its player's commencement phase or at the end of its enlistment phase. The casting of a storm spell counts as the once per game turn limit that a particular mage may cast a strategic spell. No character or legion may be teleported to or from a land that is currently beset by a storm, nor can angels or archangels be summoned to or from such a land, nor may capturing or merging legions occur in storms. No more than 1 storm spell may affect the same land at the same time. A storm spell cannot be cast on a land that is currently beset by a storm. A battle that takes place in a land beset by any type of storm is allowed to go an extra round before it results in a time loss, ending instead on the defender's 9th maneuver phase. The battle would not be allowed the extra round if the battle was affected by a storm for less than 2 full rounds of battle. There is going to be 3 types of storms in the game, which are explained in deeper detail in the rules. That's going to be blizzards, fog, and thunderstorms. Each type has its own peculiar qualities in addition to the general restrictions of all the storms that you just were listed. Battle spells can only be cast during battle except when Dispel Spells are used to dispel storm spells. When an engagement is resolved by fleeing, concession, or negotiated agreement prior to battle, no battle spells may be cast for that engagement, nor may battle spells be cast after the battle is ended. Unlike strategic spells, most battle spells require a dice roll to determine their effectiveness, and battle spells are not returned to the cup or caretaker until the mage that possesses them itself is returned to the caretaker. There are 8 subcategories of battle spells: attack spells, bless spells, curse spells, charm spells, dispel spells, banish spells, evoked character spells, and hazard spells. Each subcategory and the various specific types of spells that compose each subcategory are discussed in their respective sections in the rulebook. The following rules of this section will discuss general limitations and allowances on the use of battle spells. The numerals in the upper right corners of a battle spell counter are for identification to track which mage has cast which spell. A mage may cast 1 battle spell during its player's maneuver phase, but it must not also move. A mage may cast 1 battle spell during the player's strike phase, the strike phase following its player's maneuver phase, but it may not strike as well, or range strike. At no other time during battle may a mage cast a battle spell. A mage may not cast a particular battle spell counter more than once per battle, even if the cast of the spell was ineffective. Nor may a mage cast more than one battle spell per phase, even if the cast was ineffective. A mage may not cast a battle spell before it has moved onto the battlefield, nor may it direct a battle spell at a character that has not yet moved onto the battlefield. Magi of a defending legion may cast battle spells in the strike phase following the first maneuver phase, even though no enemy characters have yet moved onto the battleland. But such spells cannot be directed at enemy characters, nor may they be used to create magical hazards or to evoke evoked characters in the first 2 rows of hexes along the side of the attacking legion's direction of entry. When a battle takes place in a tower land, the placement of the characters of the defending legion on the hexes of the tower count as the first maneuver phase. When a mage is in contact with an enemy character, it cannot cast a battle spell during the maneuver phase, and if such a mage casts a battle spell during the strike phase, the spell must be directed at itself or at an adjacent enemy character or at one of the hexes it or such enemy characters are in. A mage may not cast a battle spell during the strike phase following the enemy player's maneuver phase, even if it is in contact with enemy characters. When a strategic spell used for mustering a reinforcement is cast during battle, the casting mage may not be in contact with enemy characters when the spell is cast. Such use of these spells would count both as the once per game turn limit for strategic spells and the once per phase limit of battle spells. When a muster with a mage or a resurrect spell is cast to reinforce a battle, the defending player must cast it on his 4th maneuver phase at the time that the reinforcement is to be mustered. It does not matter where on the battlefield, the battle land the mage is when cast such spells, so long as it is not in contact with the enemy. A battle spell that is cast at a particular character, hex, or spell counter, it is revealed when cast and placed on its target, and whatever roll of dice is required to determine the effectiveness of the cast is made at that time. Dispel Spells are the only battle spells that do not require a roll of the dice, except when a mage casts a Bless spell upon itself. If the battle spell is cast at the casting mage itself, or the hex that it occupies, or any adjacent hex, or at a character or spell counter in an adjacent hex, it is proximal spellcast. 2 hexes that are separated by a cliff are not considered adjacent. If the battle spell is cast at a hex that is not adjacent to the mage or character or spell counter in such a hex, it is a range spell. The maximum range that a mage may cast a range spell is determined by its skill factor in the same manner as range strikes. Intervening blazes, dust devils, gateways, and volcanoes block the casting range spells, and any other intervening hazard or character has no effect. A mage cannot cast range spells while it is adjacent to an enemy character. Please note that range strikes of Magi are not spells. A mage may not make a range strike during its player's maneuver phase. There is no penalty or a mage casting a range spell at a distance of 4 hexes. The usual manner for determining whether the cast of a battle spell is effective makes use of the mage's battle factors in a manner similar to the method used for striking or range striking. This method does not apply to attack spells or charm spells. So when casting, the mage uses its full battle factors, adjusted for spells that affect the mage, but unadjusted by hazards when making proximal spell cast. When casting a ranged spell, the mage uses its range strength, 1/2 of its power factor rounded down, adjusted for spells with which the mage, but unadjusted by hazards. Let me go over that one more time. It uses its range strength, 1/2 of its power factor rounded down, adjusted for spells which affect the mage, but unadjusted by hazards. The target factor of the cast is the skill factor of the character that the spell is cast at, or for the evoked character hazard spells, the number in the lower right corner of the spell counter. These target factors are not adjusted for the effects of hazards or spells. Then, the strike number of the cast is determined in the same manner as the strike number of a strike. The proper number of dice is rolled, and if any one of them equal to or exceed the strike number of the cast is effective. The effect of a battle spell will be immediate, enduring, or one of the battle round durations. Whenever a cast is ineffective, the battle spell is immediately placed face up on the casting mage's space on its player's spell card to show that it cannot be cast again during that battle. And the same thing is done when the battle spell has taken effect, if its effect is immediate or when the effect has ended. An enduring battle spell will remain in effect until it is dispelled. The mage that cast it or the character on which it was cast is eliminated or removed from the battlefield via gateway, or the battle ends. When a mage is removed from the battlefield, either by elimination or via a gateway, any battle spells that it cast that are in effect at the time are removed from the battle land and returned to its spell stack at the same time. A battle spell of 1 round duration is removed at the end of the casting mage's player's next maneuver phase, whether it was cast in a maneuver phase or a strike phase, for any of the reasons that an enduring battle spell is removed. When a battle spell is effectively cast on a character, that spell counter is placed atop the character and it will remain until its effect ends. If the character is moved, any spell counters atop that character are moved with it. This refers to battle spells that affect that particular character, not to battle spells that affect the hex the character happens to be in. Attack spells may only be cast at enemy characters that are not lords. There are 5 types of attack spells: Bolt, Evil Eye, Fireball, Mentak, and Poison. The purpose of casting an attack spell is to deliver damage to the enemy character at which the spell is cast. The dice roll made for an attack spell determines the amount of damage. The damage done to an enemy character by an attack spell is immediate and cannot be dispelled, although the enduring effect of a poison spell may be dispelled. If an attack spell is cast during a maneuver phase that delivers enough damage to the target character that it is killed, that character is not eliminated until the end of the ensuing strike phase, except that an evoked character killed in such a manner is eliminated at the end of the maneuver phase. Banish spells are cast in a manner described earlier. A banished spell may only be cast at an evoked character, friend, or foe that has itself already been cast. If the cast of a banished spell is effective, the evoked character is banished. If an enemy evoked character is banished during a maneuver phase, it is removed from the battle land at the end of that phase. If an enemy evoked character is banished during a strike phase, it is removed immediately. It does not strike back. A friendly evoked character that is banished is removed immediately during the maneuver phase or at the end of the strike phase, depending on which phase it is banished in. When banished, a non-intrinsic evoked character spell counterspell is returned to the cup. It is removed from the battle land. No points are scored for a banished evoked character, even if it was also killed by damage points before or after the banished spell was cast. A banished spell cannot be dispelled. Bless spells and curse spells are cast in the manner described earlier. Bless spells may only be cast on friendly characters, and curse spells may only be cast on enemy characters, but neither type may be cast on lords, except for heal spells. Such spells are enduring, noted by an E in the center of the bless or curse spell encounter, or of 1 battle round duration, noted by a T on the spell counter. While such spells are in effect, they alter the target character's battle factors or abilities in a manner shown on the spell counters and explained in the rules texts. A character may be simultaneously affected by any number of bless and or curse spells whose effects are cumulatively considered. A mage may cast a bless spell on itself without rolling for the cast. The spell is automatically effective. And here are some examples of the various abbreviations used on bless spells and curse spells. They are as follows: E is enduring, SKL is skill factor, SF strike factor, SPD is speed, T equals 1 battle round, and TF equals target factor. The plus and minus on such spells indicate whether the affected character is gaining or losing what the counter applies to. And again, how each blessing and curse works is in the section 14 of the Magi and the Mighty rulebook. We are going to touch on healing spells, however, before moving on. So, we are going to do a heal spell has an immediate effect of removing an amount of damage from the target character equal to the power factor, unadjusted by the spell, hazard, or range of the casting mage. So, for example, we'll say that this witch casts a heal spell at a lion 2 hexes distant that has suffered 3 points of damage. The range strength of the witch is 1, so 1 die is rolled to determine whether or not the spell is effective. The strike number of the cast is 3, and 4 is rolled, so the cast will be effective. 3 points of damage, the power factor of the witch, are removed from the lion. Any amount of healing in excess of the amount of damage that the target character had suffered is lost. It cannot be saved to remove future damage to that character or carried over to remove damage from some other character. The effect of a heal spell cannot be dispelled. A heal spell cannot be cast on a character that has already suffered enough damage to kill it. A charm spell may only be cast on an enemy creature. Lords, demi-lords, and evoked creatures cannot be charmed. Hazards have no effect on its cast except such hazards as block range spells. 2 dice are rolled for the cast if a charm spell is cast proximally. 1 die is rolled if it is cast as a range spell. The amount of the roll is added to the casting mage's power factor, unadjusted by hazard or spell. If that sum exceeds the sum of the target creature's battle factors, unadjusted by hazard or spell, the cast is effective, and the target creature is charmed. If the total equals the sum of the target's battle factors, unadjusted, the cast is ineffective, and the casting mage immediately suffers 1 point of damage, otherwise the spell is merely ineffective. Charm spells are enduring. While under the effect of a charm spell, the charmed creature is treated as a member of the casting mage's legion. A mage may not charm a creature if its legion already contains 7 characters. As soon as a creature is charmed, it becomes active as a friendly character, moving and striking with the casting player's own characters, except that it may not move in the same phase as it is charmed. If a charmed in a strike phase, it may strike or range strike if able. A charm spell cannot be cast on a creature that is already under the effect of a charm spell, nor may a mage have more than 1 charm spell in effect at the same time. Now, if the charm spell endures until the end of battle and the casting mage and the charmed creature both survive the battle, the charmed creature will remain as a member of the mage's legion, and it is no longer considered a charmed creature. If the player that the charmed creature concedes the battle before the charmed creature is eliminated, it reverts to its original player's legion. If the mage that cast the charm spell is eliminated at the same time as the last character controlled by an enemy player, the charmed creature immediately reverts to its original player's control. For victory point purposes, a charmed creature counts as part of the legion of the player who controlled it at the time it was killed. A creature under the effect of a charm spell cannot be exited from battle via gateway. If the casting mage is removed from battle via gateway before the charmed creature has been eliminated, it immediately reverts control to its original player. Dispel Spells. They can be used to dispel storm spells and battle spells that are enduring or of 1 battle round duration, except that evoked characters cannot be dispelled by Dispel Spells. Strategic spells that are not storm spells and battle spells whose counters are removed immediately after being cast cannot be dispelled. Dispelling a spell does not negate the effects that the spell has already had, it merely ends its effectiveness at the moment the dispel is cast. The effectiveness of a Dispel spell is automatic and immediate, no dice roll is required. The spell counter being dispelled must be within the range of the dispelling mage, and the cast of a Dispel spell can only be blocked by such intervening hazards as are listed in the hazard blockage list. A mage that is in battle can dispel a storm spell that affects the land from any hex on the battle land, and such a cast cannot be blocked, but a mage cannot dispel a storm spell while it is in contact with an enemy character. And those hazards that block are listed in 11.2.2 of the rulebook. A storm spell can only be dispelled by a Dispel spell cast by a mage in a legion on the land the storm besets, including during battle, as mentioned above. If the storm spell is dispelled while the mage is not in battle, the use of the Dispel spell would count as the once per game turn limit that a mage may cast a strategic spell, and the Dispel spell could only be cast during the player's commencement phase. When a storm spell is dispelled, its effects immediately end, and its counter is returned to the cup. When a Dispel spell is used to dispel a battle spell, the dispelled battle spell is returned to the spell stack of the mage that cast it, face up, to show that it has already been used in battle. If a Dispel spell is used to dispel a storm spell during the commencement phase, the Dispel spell is returned to the casting mage, but it cannot be cast again during the battle on that game turn. A mage has an inherent ability to dispel battle spells that it has cast, including evoked character spells. This ability is not represented by a spell counter, nor limited in the number of times a mage may do so. But the use of this ability would count as the once per phase limit that a mage may cast a battle spell, and, for example, if the mage made use of this ability during the maneuver phase, it could not also move, nor could it do so if it were in contact. If the ability is at range, the spell to be dispelled must be within the mage's range, and its use is blocked in the same manner as a range spell by the intervening hazards, again listed in 11.2.2. It can only be used to dispel one spell at a time. When a mage is removed from a battle, either by elimination or via gateway, any battle spells that is cast remain in effect at the time it was removed and are also immediately removed and returned to the spell stack. When a character is removed from battle, either by elimination or via gateway, any battle spells that affect it are also immediately removed and returned to the Magi that cast them. When a hazard spell is dispelled, any spells that were cast on that hazard spell are likewise removed and returned to the Magi that cast them. An evoked character spell is cast to evoke the evoked character represented on the spell counter into battle. It is cast in the manners described in 11.3 of the rulebook. It can only be cast at a vacant hex that does not contain a hazard that would disallow the presence of the evoked character. The features of an evoked character counters are arranged similarly to those of a character counter. After an evoked character spell is effectively cast, the evoked character may immediately be utilized in the same manner as a character of the player's legion in regard to movement, striking, blocking range fire, contact, etc., but they do not count towards the limit of 7 characters per legion. Evoked characters cannot be dispelled by Dispel Spells, but they may be dispelled by the Magi that cast them. Evoked characters may be banished. Evoked character spells are dispelled and returned to their respective Magi spell stacks if killed by damage and eliminated. If the mage has cast them and is removed from the battle land, or at the end of the battle in which they were cast, an evoked character that is dispelled is returned to the Magi's spell stack. A non-intrinsic evoked character that is banished is returned to the cup. An evoked character cannot be charmed by a charm spell, nor may it exit battle via gateway. Attack spells and bless spells and curse spells may affect evoked characters in the same manner they affect other characters. Evoked characters may have an affinity to hazards. Consult the hazard affinity chart in the rulebook for that. If a cast during a maneuver phase, an evoked character may be moved in that same phase unless it was evoked into a hex adjacent to an enemy character. If cast during a strike phase, an evoked character may strike and range strike in that phase if they are able to do so. Once an evoked character becomes active, activity is not limited by the casting mage's spell range, nor does its activity limit the activity of the casting mage, nor does its presence disallow that mage from casting another evoked character spell. There are 4 elementals in the game: air, earth, fire, and water, and they all have different stats and different benefits from hazards. And there are also other evoked characters like lizards, bats, imps, harpies, etc. Hazard spells are cast in the manner as described earlier. The target factor of the cast is the number in the lower right corner of the hazard spell counter being cast. If a hazard spell is cast in an occupied hex, the cast loses 1 strike factor. The hazard spell casting chart, which is in the rulebook 18.8, specifies on which type of hexes the various hazard spells may or may not be cast. The magical hazards that are created by such spells are enduring, except that the blaze spells cast on a plains hex and the gateway spells last only for 1 battle round. Dust devils are the only magical hazards that can be moved after they've been cast. If the cast of a hazard spell is effective, the affected hex is immediately treated as if it contains a magical hazard. If that hex was occupied at the time of the cast, the occupant is only affected to the extent that the hazard thus created affects it. The hazard spell should be set aside, occupying counter on it so that it can be clearly seen. If it is set atop the occupying counter, be sure that the hazard spell counter is not moved along with the occupying counter. If a hazard spell is cast effectively during a strike phase, the damage that it might do at the start of each strike phase is applied immediately. The hazard spells of bog, bramble, drift, hill, and plains, sand dune, tower, tree, and volcano all create magical hazards whose effect are the same as those of natural hazard types. A hill, sand dune, tower, and volcano spells all have different effects. When a magical hazard is created atop another type of hazard, natural or magical, the effects of the underlying hazard are nullified unless such combination of hazards is noted in the hazard spellcasting chart as being cumulative. When a magical hazard is cast at a hex that contains a magical hazard whose effects are not cumulative, the previous magical hazard is dispelled, which would include the cast of thorn or wood spirit spell upon another of its type. If the effects are cumulative, each type of hazard remains in full effect. For example, a bog spell cast at a sand hex would disallow the entry of characters not native to bog and slow the entry of non-flying bog natives who were not also native to sand. When the cast of a hazard spell is dependent on the presence of a previously created magical hazard, the dependent magical hazard is also dispelled if the magical hazard that allowed it to be cast is dispelled. For example, a thorn spirit cast in a magical bramble hex could not remain there if the magical bramble is dispelled. When a magical hazard is created atop another magical hazard in which its effects are cumulative in a hex which contains a natural hazard with which the effects of the previously cast magical hazard's effect are cumulative, the effects of all three hazards are cumulative. For example, a thorn spirit spell is cast on a hex containing both magical bramble and natural sand. The effects of all three hazards are in full force. The effects of blazes, dust devils, and other things are also explained in the rules, but we'll touch on the gateway for a moment. A gateway spell allows the casting player to either exit one of his characters from battle, including the casting mage, or to bring another character from one of his legions into battle. Only one character can be transported by any particular gateway spell, and no one character can be transported by gateways more than once in an engagement phase. The transfers may only take place during the casting player's next maneuver phase following the casting of the spell, providing that gateway spell has not been dispelled in the meantime, as the gateway lasts only one battle round. A gateway may be cast only in an unoccupied natural planes hex. While the gateway spell is in effect, no non-flying character may enter that hex, and no flying character may end its move on that hex, except the character that uses the gateway. No range strike, including those of Magi or range spell, may trace through a gateway hex. The casting player must declare which of his legions the gateway is connected to at the time of casting, and he cannot change that connection to another of his legions. A gateway cannot be connected to a legion that is or has been engaged during that engagement phase, or to a legion in a land beset by storm. Nor can a gateway spell be cast in a land that is currently beset by a storm. To exit the character must be moved into the gateway hex. It is then immediately removed from the battlefield and transported into the connected legion. Said legion cannot already contain 7 characters. To bring a character into the battle through the gateway, the character is removed from its legion and placed in the gateway hex, and it may be moved in the same phase even if an enemy character is adjacent to the gateway hex. The gateway hex itself does not count against the entering character's movement. A character cannot be transported by gateway into a legion that currently contains 7 characters. And again, charmed creatures and evoked characters may not use gateways. If a mage is removed from battle via gateway, any battle spells that it had cast remain in effect, that it has that remain in effect are immediately dispelled, and the spell counters are returned to the mage. If the casting mage exits via gateway, the gateway spell is also immediately dispelled and removed at the time, rather than the end of the movement phase. Thorn spirits, webs, and wood spirits also have various effects. And here I'm going to suggest that you print out or find the rules for the hazard spellcasting chart. I'm not going to go over it in too much detail because there's just a lot of information and it's easier to have this at the table as a reference. But this is the hazard spellcasting chart. It clarifies on which hexes the various hazard spells can be cast. Occupied refers to either if a character or an evoked character. The specific hazards refer to natural hazards except where otherwise noted. Elevated hazards are those which lie along hex size. Magical hazards refer to any hazard spell counter in effect on the battlefield except otherwise noted. So there's various symbols and letters here. X not allowed, P permitted, M permitted, also for magical hazards, and A not atop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just for magical hazards denoted by an M, wood spirits, etc. Note that the elevated magical hazards always nullify the effect of any underlying natural hazard, but that other magical hazards do not nullify the effects of natural elevated hazards. So for example, this bog on an occupied hex is permitted, providing that there is not another condition that disallows it. And then this 1 in the upper right corner is only permitted if the occupant is native to the hazard being cast. So you just follow what you're trying to do on this chart and find out if it's legal. When it comes to scoring with the Magi and the Mighty, the non-mage characters in the Mighty supplement are scored in the same manner as the basic game. Power factor times skill factor equals point value. If a spell is drawn for a demon or Rakasha, its point value is increased by 4 whether or not that spell was cast. Changelings are worth 30 points. To determine the point value of a mage, add the number of spell counters in its spell stack, not counting evoked character spell counters which were banished or killed during battle, and add that amount to the mage's power factor, and then multiply by the mage's skill factor. An evoked character that is banished does not score victory points. An evoked character that is killed and is also not banished is scored in the same manner as a character. If a mage flees, divide its point value in half. A charmed creature counts as a member of the legion of the controlling player at the time it is killed. A character that exits the battle via gateway cannot count toward the point value of that battle. If a mage exits a battle via gateway, an evoked character that it had cast that was killed prior to the mage's exit may count toward the point value of the battle. No points are scored for capturing enemy legions. When a player's Titan or Demigod, if it is their final, is eliminated, the points scored for this legion that are removed do not permit the acquisition of spells. If a player's Titan is eliminated in a battle which he also has a demigod present, the battle continues, and the player who slew the Titan does not score points for that other player's legions that are removed until the end of battle, even though those legions are removed from play immediately. And because when playing a game, etiquette is so important, it is in the rules, so let's go over this real quick. First is learning the effects and uses of various spells will require time, practice, and patience while other players ponder the options the spells make available. The players whose game turn or maneuver phase it is should be allowed to access these rules whenever they so desire. Players should make use of their time between their turns to acquaint themselves with spells that they hold. Spell stacks, like Legion stacks, are secret. A player is not allowed to browse through the contents of other players' spell stacks except when using a vision spell. A player is free to reveal spells in his stacks to other players if they so desire. The casting of spells is always optional. No instance exists in which a player must cast a spell. Spells drawn from the cup must be drawn blindly. Players are not allowed to look into the cup, even if only to see how many spell counters are in there. If a player is unable to draw spells from the spell cup because none remain, such lost draws are not made up when spell counters again become available. If a player musters a mage for which the caretaker's stack lacks the proper intrinsic spell counters, he may demand that the other players inspect their spell stacks to try and find it. He may not inspect the spell counters in the cup to try and find it. If it cannot be found, use a blank spell counter to replace it. A player may not alter the move of a legion after he has drawn spells due to that movement, nor may he decide not to muster a mage after he has already drawn spells for it, unless, of course, the rules would not have allowed that movement or mustering. The spell stacks of a player's magi must be kept carefully separated so that there is no confusion as to which spell counter belongs to which mage. The spaces on the spell cards provide ample room for this, providing that the spell counters are kept in neat stacks. When a mage is in a battle, a player may wish to place its spell counters to the side so that he can spread them out and consider them more carefully, but again, care must be taken not to confuse them with the spell counters of other magi. When a player has more than one magi in battle, it may be necessary to keep a written record of which mage cast which spell to avoid confusion. Because the returning of spell counters to the cup affects what and how many spell counters are in the cup has available to be drawn, clarification is required to exactly when spell counters are put back in the cup. Storm spells are returned immediately whenever they're dispelled. Other strategic spells are returned immediately after their effect is completed. For example, a Capture Enemy Legion spell would not be returned until the capturing was resolved or disallowed. A non-intrinsic evoked character that is banished is returned to the cup as soon as it is removed from the battlefield. In all other instances, non-intrinsic spells are returned to the cup when their respective magi and their intrinsic spells are returned to the caretaker's stacks. Spell stacks should remain intact until the end of battle so that they might be scored correctly. And that is some basic setup to get you started on the Magi and the Mighty expansion. Again, just use the Mighty or just use the Magi. Mix them both. Just play it how you want. There are also optional rules in this new rulebook, and then some designer notes and suggestions for strategy. It also has all the spell index, all the extended strike charts, advanced character charts, and master charts that you'll need. So everything you need is in that file. Again, I found mine on BoardGameGeek.com under Files on the Titan board game page. Magi and the Mighty by Daniel Karp. Now, at the start of the video, I said there was also an official expansion called the Titan Demilords. Well, I looked at it a little closer, and it's not official. While it was handed out at a convention in the 80s, it was designed by other players. So it was given out at Warthog, the Washington area retinue of tactically highly organized gamers. So this was designed by Bud Hamer, and it's just another way to play Titan. I'm not going to go over each individual rule, but I will tell you I also found this in the files section on Board Game Geek for Titan, And like I said, I don't really have this one colored or printed or anything else, but it is ready to go. I don't know how well it would work with adding the Magi and the Mighty in, because it changes where these characters can be mustered and how, but it offers different varying effects and different lords and stuff from your new demi-lords. So it's just another optional way to play if you want to look that one up. They each have their own effect, the way to muster them, what they do, scoring, and what they add to the game. It's a little interesting, but now we're going to jump over to the Battlelands of Titan, which was official for the game. Now, the Badlands, as it is called, it's new Battlelands for Titan. It was available in a magazine, I forget which one at the moment, but those Battlelands were preserved via another file on Board Game Geek's website. They add various different stages and ways you can fight to the game and different maps. One of them is the plains. When there's a battle there, you actually would roll a die. On a 1, you'd get the water hole. On a 2, you'd get the town. On a 3, you'd get fort. And on 4 to 6, you'd fight on the original plains. There's also a new hazard, which has the effects of entry is forbidden to all non-flying characters, and a flying character cannot end its movement on a lake hex. Has no effect on striking, and no effect on range striking. There are alternative Badlands that you can just add to the game, and they will change up how the maps look. And again, those are available on Board Game Geek. Just a variance in the way to play. Now, they weren't officially produced as an expansion, they were just available in this magazine, but Avalon Hill gave full permission to the company for you to photocopy them for personal use. Avalon Hill's General Magazine, that's where the Battlelands for Titan came from. So, that is a rundown on how to play Titan, how to play the Magi and the Mighty, and to point you in the direction of 2 other expansions for the game if you can't get enough of this game. It is a really fun game, and I've spent a lot of time playing it growing up. I hope to get the Magi and the Mighty on the table with my buddies soon, because it looks like a lot of fun. I haven't played it yet, but I know despite my messy setup and relative inaction while I read a rulebook, I do hope that hearing the rulebook and getting some visuals does help you learn how to play enough to the point where you can get going and reference the rules as you play, and you won't need them as much. So, this is one of my favorite games. Thanks for taking a look at how to play it.